Welcome back to Good Morning Sibos. I'm Nadine DeRaza.
And I'm Stephen Chia. It's Tuesday, 17th of October, and our second day here in Toronto. We have another packed schedule for today.
It's really busy, isn't it?
That
Full
is
on.
true.
4 shows in total.
Every day. So let's look ahead to the business of the day here at the Convention Centre with our panel of journalists. And today we're delighted to welcome Ali Patterson from FinTech Finance.
And Ali is joined by financial journalist Joel Clark.
And also Chris Hall, editor of Sibos Issues. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the show. Ali, let me start off with you. Yesterday we had a big session. What were some of the highlights for you?
Got to be Admiral Michelle Howard talking about cybersecurity. She was pretty impressive, and I think cyber, massive talking point last year, and this year it seems to be even growing. Very European, but GDPR coming in, a lot of focus around cybersecurity for that. So for me, that was the biggest highlight yesterday.
And how about you, Chris? What was your highlight?
Well, I was quite interested in what Dave McKay had to say in the opening plenary, his presentation, CEO of RBC, of course. And there were some kind of parallel themes with Admiral Howard, really, in terms of the importance of data. Clearly that was a big factor in the kind of cybersecurity session, but also his ideas about where bank revenue is going to come from, and his idea of whereas previously banks had needed had always needed scale to kind of drive their business. His concept of kind of data scale is going to be important to kind of growing up revenues in the future. I thought that was quite interesting.
Joel.
I think the banking sessions kicking off yesterday particularly focused on GPI, the global payments innovation, some of the efforts that have been made to bring greater efficiencies, transparency to the payments industry. And I think it's a work in progress. It's a great initiative. It's only been 2 years since it was first announced, but as with everything, it's about sign up. It's about how many banks are using it. It's about how many transactions are actually going through the project. So time will tell, I think.
So it sounds like a great first day. Now this morning already, it's a lively session. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the World Wide Web, if you needed ever reminding, he's at Inner Tribe. He's doing a session on the open web. Is that going to make us safer or more vulnerable? Who wants that one? Go on, Joel, go for it.
I have to defer on that. I'm nearly about to get up and walk and go and go into the session because it's starting now. I think it will make us safer if it is truly open, because if it's truly open, then you can see what everybody is doing, even the good guys, even the bad guys, and it would just, that level of knowledge and transparency. Anyone telling you that more transparency, more openness is making you less safe is clearly hiding something and probably the bad guy.
Chris, any different?
Well, no, I tend to agree with Ali, actually. I mean, there was an Inner Tribe session yesterday that covered a lot of these themes, and they had a hacker on the panel who was saying something quite similar in terms of, well, if we're all able to kind of share information on a kind of level playing field, then there's less to hide. There's less scope for that kind of criminal behaviour to thrive. So that's an interesting point, I thought.
I mean, it has been moving in that direction, because with a lot more collaboration and partnerships, and there's so many things happening at the same time. You need that level of transparency to allow things to be a bit more clear to the end user as well. Well, Joel, what about you? What are some things you're looking forward to today, perhaps?
Well, the big issue debate at 11 o'clock is going to be a centrepiece that I'll be covering today. The discussion's moderated by Anne McElvoy from The Economist, and the topic is geopolitics, really, how nation-first politics are changing the agenda. So I think it's quite interesting. The last few years in this session, we've been talking about regulation, Dodd-Frank, European post-crisis reforms, and how they're all being implemented, the challenges of cross-border cooperation and harmonization. And now what's really interesting is that following the events of last year, the election of Donald Trump, the Brexit referendum, the agenda's completely changed, and it's all about how those geopolitical developments will impact on our industry and on regulation.
And geopolitics, you just can't get away from it. The Catalonian referendum, the Chinese parties, Congress as well. It all seems to be happening at once. How are we going to cope with all of this?
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I think it was quite interesting yesterday. There was a session with Aaron Klein from Brookings Institute in the Swift Institute right at the start of the day. And he was talking about the uncertainties surrounding Trump and what, for all his rhetoric about repeal of Dodd-Frank, making, rolling back regulations, it's not actually a priority of the administration. It's taken a long time really to get anywhere and to say, what their ambitions are. So I think a lot of it is about uncertainty and actually just making sense of where we're going, of what these developments mean.
Just in terms on Brexit, I mean, the UK seems to be caring about it. Whenever I do any conference in Europe, everybody's moved on and nobody really cares. What's your sense? Is Brexit just big for those in the UK, or is it on everybody's mind further afield?
No, I think it's going to impact the whole of the industry. I think when you think about London's role as a global financial centre and the cross-border flows in Europe and beyond, I mean, I think we can't get away from it. And like what's going on in the US, a lot is still not known, but we've got to watch those negotiations very carefully to see, where we're going from here, really.
I actually did have a good chat with Aaron Klein, and we did talk about Dodd-Frank and the uncertainty. That was the main thing that came through, that things were just uncertain. Trump knows where he wants to go, but how he's going to get there, that's the uncertain bit. So I think time will tell. We're talking about a lot of technology here. Artificial intelligence is another buzzword. I mean, Ali, let me put that to you. A few sessions happening on that again. What impact do you see AI having on the industry?
Honestly, I see about half the people's jobs around here disappearing due to AI.
Not ours, though.
yeah. I know. I was actually chatting to the guys at IGTB, and they've got this cool contextual banking thing, and there's a lot of sort of AI attached to that. And it's amazing. When it's actually done properly, and artificial intelligence is a very hard thing to define. Some people say it's this, some people say it's that, but when you're doing something that removes you having to think about it, I categorize that as AI, and there's just so much technology around here that's really making the industry more efficient, and that can only be a benefit for the consumer.
Isn't it striking a balance, though, that the human touch will still be important, so technology has its place to pay, but it's a balance to strike?
Yes and no, and
you're out of a job, basically, aren't you?
People are not ones and zeros, but they sure as hell act like they are. That's the that's the cool.
What do you think, Joe?
I think you'll always need the humans. I think it's about striking the right balance. And
Thank you.
Don't worry, your job's safe.
I'm talking years, by the way, like decades in advance. Like,
I think there's a lot of talk about Sibos about the making the most of innovation and actually steering things in the right direction. I think the same goes for AI. I think it's a buzzword. It's one that's definitely overused, sometimes misused. I think there will always be a role for humans, but it's about being innovative and finding your place with the technology, really.
Now, Chris, we've got a large exhibition floor here. We're down on the exhibition floor as well, if people want to pop by and say hello. Any exhibitors caught your eye and what they're doing?
I haven't spent a huge amount of time on the exhibition floor so far. Last night around cocktail hour, I was wandering around a little bit, and certainly there was a couple of Japanese and Swiss stands that were doing quite a lot of big business and getting a lot of attention. But I think that I certainly get a sense that as the week progresses, it's always enjoyable to see kind of the kind of community coming together and kind of meeting old friends and kind of
and there's loads
really
of
kind of catching
here,
up on where on what each other think on key topics facing the industry. And I think that's one of the kind of key benefits of Sibos. They're able to say, well, this is how topic X has been impacting my bank. How about you guys? And to be able to do that face to face over a cocktail, I think is really, really important.
Let's have a quick look at last minute or so on some key trends that you think are happening in the industry, and in particular focus for today. Ali and Joel, if you want to comment on that.
I hear someone say blockchain again, but it is relevant, and that's why it's said constantly. But I've heard a lot about financial inclusion, and I don't just mean that from a social responsibility. I mean financial inclusion for revenue. Like we're here in Canada, you've got a huge population, not by comparison, who are spread out. How do you bank a population like that? That still comes under financial inclusion. So I think that's quite a big point.
Yeah, we'll be talking about financial inclusion as well later on. So fair point.
I think I'd come back to geopolitics. I think that's the theme of the day. It's about how all of these developments, the US, Europe, the UK, how that's impacting on our industry. I think that's a big unknown. It's a big question, and it's something that is vexing the industry at the moment.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for having your thoughts. I know you've got a busy day ahead, reporting on all the developments at SibosTV. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, it's a real privilege to be here in Toronto during Canada's 150th anniversary year. And here are some different views of the city. Let's take a look.
got to say, I've really been enjoying those videos.
Yes.
Not your typical tourism kind of, video for each.
Put a spell on you.
It almost did. And it's great because we have the man to just talk about it. Canada has decided to theme its 150th anniversary year on a number of key themes. And here to tell us more about that is Andrew Weir from Tourism Toronto. Morning, Andrew.
Andrew.
Morning. Welcome to Toronto.
Thank you very much for having us. Now, I know obviously your country's been celebrating its 150th anniversary. We've just heard Stephen mention, and it's among some key themes that you're particularly keen to highlight, whether it's about Indigenous people, the environment, youth, diversity and inclusion. So why are those themes particularly important?
This is a great time to be in Canada. It's been an exciting year for us. We're obviously celebrating the 150th, and I think it means different things to different people. In Toronto, where this is really a celebration of that inclusiveness, the progressive spirit that frankly is an important message right now to show to the world, and to show that nowhere is that more true than right here in Canada's downtown, and in a country that's known and appreciated around the world for that welcoming inclusiveness. But in Toronto, we it's funny, the city publishes its official documentation in 20 some languages, and you walk around the streets, you see it, you feel it, and you see it in the restaurants, you see it in the culture through the city. So that sense of everybody's welcome. All flavors are welcome, as we say in the video. You really feel it when you walk around the city. So it's important for us to tell that story.
So all those key themes come together, you think, in Toronto?
It's important. Toronto is a big global city, but it's a very Canadian global city. And so you'll get the combination of course, you've got the fintech offices here, and you've got the broader industry, but it's also very Canadian. And you'll see hockey, and you'll see all the things. You'll see Canadian flags, of course, on the buildings, and it's a very Canadian kind of place, and that's important to us to be part of this bigger Canadian story.
Egalitarian, I think, I've heard it described as.
And of course, we heard about all the microbreweries, so that's very important. Good Canadian asset as well. But in Toronto specifically, how have you guys been celebrating this big birthday? Some of the highlights, perhaps?
Well, it's been a year-long celebration, so this has not been just about kind of one day. Canada Day on July 1st is always a big celebration, but in Toronto, it's really been all year round. So a lot of our institutions, the cultural institutions like the Royal Ontario Museum, the Art Gallery of Ontario, they've all had exhibitions celebrating different aspects of Canadian culture, whether it's some of that diversity that we talked about or Indigenous art. We've seen it in, the Contact Photography Festival, one of my favorite events in the city, featured all of its major exhibitions this year. It was earlier in the year, it was in May, the entire month of May, and it's actually the largest photography festival in the world, but all of the feature exhibitions were Canadian photographers this year. So you're seeing a lot of what you see every year in Canada, but it's all got that Canadian spin on it and a little bit of a celebration of ourselves. We don't always take the time to celebrate ourselves in Canada.
But you are this year.
But this year, this year we've allowed
Once
ourselves...
in every 150 years,
We've
allowed ourselves a little bit of that self-indulgence this
You
year.
have got the best job in the world then for this year. Now,
I remember that every day.
everybody knows your Prime Minister around the world, Justin Trudeau. I can't think of any other Prime Ministers that many people would be able to name. He's had a real global impact. How's he helped you in particular when it comes to tourism and promoting Canada?
Well, it says a lot about our country that Canada's always been seen as a beacon of inclusivity, but never more so probably than at this point in time, because of the sharp contrast you're seeing between Canada and our Prime Minister and other countries and other leaders. And that contrast is important to us because it gets at what is at the root of our DNA in
Very
Canada.
diplomatic, by the way.
Well, this is we'll just use this opportunity to talk about what we do well, not where others perhaps are falling short. So, but it really does kind of put the focus on what I think is Canada's best attribute. And for all the mountains and polar bears, and it's wonderful. Go see it all, absolutely.
What percentage points are you up then
But
since
at the
it's
end of the
been
day,
in?
what we do best in the world is welcome the world.
Yes.
And nowhere is that more true than here in Toronto, and it's why we call it Canada's downtown, because you've got all you have that Canadianness that we're so proud of, but we also have that sense of globalism that I think is so important.
It's funny you talk about Canadianness. It's a bit hard to understand, but I spent 4 years in school in Vancouver, so in university. I get a sense of that, yeah. But in Sibos this week, just very quickly for delegates who are here, any highlights that they can look out for while they're here these next few days?
Oh, you don't have enough time on this show to cover them, but it's, I always say the best way to experience Toronto is with a camera, a map, and a comfortable pair of shoes.
Okay.
Just walk. And the great thing is with the convention center here, you're right in the middle of downtown. So you can literally walk out the front doors of the north building or the south building. I love Kensington Market, and the art gallery is a great pocket up on Dundas Street. I love Old Town. If you come out the front of the north building, make a right turn and just keep walking along Front Street, you'll walk through Old Town and end up in the Distillery District. Yorkville's a great area to walk around. And if you want to venture further afield, there's just neighborhoods all throughout the city.
So just walk, in other words.
Just walk. And
Now, you might be able to help me with my Niagara Falls appeal. I want to go on Friday. Do you know anybody that would go with me?
Well, the falls are wonderful, and
Yes.
you know, it's something that you have to see. It's funny, I've seen them many, many times, of course, but every time you go, your eyes just open that much wider because they're
I know.
amazing. And
It's a force of nature. Well, lovely to have you here. Thank you
Sorry,
very
just
much.
very quickly, I've got to ask you, the videos, they're called The Six.
Oh, yes.
Why? Just give us...
The 6 comes from the area codes in Toronto. We have 2 area codes. One is 416, so it's just abbreviated to the 6, and there's another area code 647. And so it was one of the musicians, a rapper, started using the 6, and then other musicians started picking it up, and it really came out of the kind of rap culture referring to it as the 6, and now it's just become embraced.
It
So
has indeed.
There you go.
welcome to the 6. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
We feel very happy to be here. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks so
Great to
much.
have you here today. So if you do manage to get some free time, here's a quick look at some of the city's highlights with a guide from Andrew's Tourism Toronto.
No matter where you are in the city, you can't escape the CN Tower. It's been dominating the city skyline for more than 4 decades. With its 360-degree view of the skyline, it is a must-see for any visitor to the city. Be sure when you're there to stop in and grab some of the amazing Canadian cuisine. For more down-to-earth foodies, your #1 stop should be St. Lawrence Market. More than 120 vendors sell food from all over the world, as well as lots of local produce, including a Toronto culinary must, the pea meal bacon sandwich. So Robert, you are the owner of the famous Carousel Bakery, where the pea meal bacon sandwich was named Toronto's official sandwich last year. What about this sandwich makes it so amazing and special?
Well, I think it's because it's authentically Torontonian. It's probably Toronto's most original food. It was formulated back in the 1800s by a gentleman called William Davies, who's also responsible for giving Toronto its nickname Hogtown. So it ties a bit of our culture and history together, and it's something that's become a very popular thing to have when visiting the St. Lawrence Market, the birthplace of the pea meal bacon.
And while you're visiting, why not pick up some maple syrup to take home with you? So what is maple syrup? Where does it come from and what do you use it for?
Maple syrup comes straight from a tree. It's all natural, straight from the farm. You can use it on oatmeal, pancakes, yogurt, tea, coffee, dessert.
Amazing.
Anything.
For the culture vultures among you, Toronto doesn't disappoint. There's lots of museums and galleries. The Royal Ontario Museum is one of the largest museums in North America with more than 6 million items in 40 galleries. The Art Gallery of Ontario is a work of art in itself and features more than 80,000 individual pieces. The gallery is a short walk from Queen Street West, named the coolest neighborhood in the world by Vogue magazine. It is an amazing place to experience all of the atmosphere and buzz that Toronto has to offer.
Well, the great news about being here at the convention center is every one of those highlights only a short walk or a quick cab ride away.
So very easy. And while you're at Sibos, don't forget to visit the Canada Lounge, and that's in the Discover Zone on level 600.
There will be representatives promoting Canada and its main financial services. They'll be present, including a feature on 32 of the best Canadian fintech startups.
Now, politics inevitably has an effect on a lot of what we're talking about, and international transactions, compliance and fraud all being scrutinised more and more by governments.
To discuss this and more, we are now joined by Rebecca Harding, founder and CEO of Equant Analytics, a big data analytics and supply company specialising in trade and trade finance.
Rebecca,
Morning,
lovely
welcome.
to have you here.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here too.
Great, and it seems to me that you wear so many different hats, from data analysis to trade finance and government advisor. So what specifically brings you here to Sibos?
Well, actually, I have to be truthful. I nearly put my Canada beanie on to sit here as well, that I was given last night. No, seriously, the reason why I'm here is because this is a fantastic venue. I work with banks, I work with trade finance practitioners, I work with academics and politicians as well in the area of trade and trade finance, and it's fantastic to network with some of the biggest organisations in the world who are practically implementing some of the things that I think. It's amazing.
Well, we know you're also a specialist advisor to the government on entrepreneurship in the UK government. We talked just about some startups as well, and we're seeing more and more of them creeping up. Do you think they will be a threat to the big players in the industry?
So I think that's a really important question, and the issue about fintech and the issue about all of these startups is that it creates an innovation energy, and you can see that here within O-Tribe. It's very exciting. Will they ultimately be a threat to banks? No, I think the language has changed in banks, and what's beginning to happen is banks are seeing fintech startups and grow-ups, if you like, and scale-ups as opportunities to collaborate, so they're collaborators. So it's actually changing the way that banking is working. Banks are becoming a little bit more of systems integrators, providing liquidity and so on, and this is helping banks to reach parts of the world and markets that they can't otherwise reach.
Now at Sibos, there's loads of small fintech companies. I hope you've had a chance to do the rounds. Have any in particular caught your eye?
So, I mean, it wouldn't be fair to highlight too many of them because there are just so many here, and it's really exciting. All of them. Right, starting with... Seriously, I had the opportunity to speak to Token yesterday, and they're a brilliant company. What they're doing is amazing in terms of innovation in open banking. They've got solutions for payments and for the tokenization of money, if you like, money that can go across borders seamlessly. Very interesting company, and that's one to watch.
Yep. Anything else?
I think there's too much. I could talk about it for hours.
Well, you have, I'm sure, talked about some, but we are asking you about your book as well, because you came up with this, The Weaponization of Trade, The Great Unbalancing of Politics and Economics. What drove you to write this book?
I think we're living in very interesting times, and I've been involved in the trade space for a very long time, and when I first started looking at trade, we were talking about opportunities for all, we were talking about economic development, we were talking about borderless world, you know, everything was positive, the language was positive, and about 2 years ago, with the advance of Brexit and populism, the rise of populism, I noticed that slowly but surely the language was changing. It was becoming weaponized, and you know, Donald Trump is using this language as well. Trade war with China, protectionism, we're building walls. All of a sudden, and you know, our own Chancellor of the Exchequer last week in the UK said the people across the table, Europe, are enemies, and he backtracked on that very quickly. But what's happening is we're beginning to see trade as this actually warlike thing. And I was chatting this through with the publisher, and I said, you know, effectively trade's being weaponized, and he said, there's your title.
Yeah. It's a great title. And just on that note, when you think about Brexit and Trump, aside from protectionism and nationalism, what other impact is that going to have on trade?
So I think Brexit in terms of global trade will have very little global impact. I think what is happening instead, so I think a lot of these things that the companies still need to trade, and banks still need to finance trade. But what's beginning to happen is that there is a reserve around the uncertainty in the world. So companies are beginning to go, hang on a minute, do I want to invest at the moment until I know what's happening? Do I want to hire people?
Companies
and they're
hate
thinking, and it's the uncertainty that's actually, so it's not the populism in itself, it's actually, or the rhetoric around trade, or the bilateralism that's creeping into trade. It's actually the fact that the world is becoming more and more uncertain. And there is this rhetorical escalation that we're seeing. We've seen it in North Korea, you know, we're seeing it now in the relationship with Europe in the UK. And what that's doing is actually making the world seem dangerous as well. Right. We're at a very important point in history.
And it's a multipolar world in many ways as well, with public opinion coming into the fore. So who's going to win?
So I have a slide that I use when I'm talking about the book, and it has flags on it talking about the economic nationalists versus the new globalists. And the economic nationalists are obviously the UK and the United States. And I couldn't get Google to make the flags for Germany and Japan the same size. They were just slightly bigger. So I hope that tells a story that actually we're beginning to see the new globalists come through, the ones who are actually promoting globalization, multilateralism, because everyone here at Sibos wants that to be the reality.
And not nationalism.
And not nationalism.
Right.
It's very dangerous. Nationalism, when it's harnessed by politicians and there's a tide of populism as well, is dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think what we can do to stop that is just carry on promoting multilateralism as much as possible.
Well, unfortunately, when politicians use that for their own agenda, then sometimes the outcomes are a little bit different. They have different agendas. So how can the industry then further lobby governments to help get them back on the other path?
So I think practice what we preach, and if you look at everything that's here, the fintechs, the interaction, the way in which money is beginning to flow seamlessly across borders, all of that is here to stay. We know that's here to stay, and working with government rather than against government is the most important thing. So government are looking for ideas the whole time. One day we hope that those ideas will get through, and that the lobbying side of banking and of business is to help governments understand that they are actually taking the world to the brink of something that nobody wants.
Mm-hmm.
And businesses deserve that certainty, don't
Absolutely.
they? Yeah, indeed.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Good luck with your book, The
Thank you.
Weaponization of Trade.
Yeah. Well, we know, just very quickly before you leave, because you have a session coming up as
Yes.
well. The Retreat from Globalization, Threats and Opportunities for Financial Market Infrastructures. That's coming up on Thursday. Perhaps a sneak peek?
Oh,
A
yes.
sneak peek. So it's quite difficult when you have a title like that not to be political. And the people, we had a chat last night. We promised that we wouldn't be too emotional about this, but it's very difficult to extract what's happening in the political world from the day-to-day of boring old transactions banking, right? Because what is happening is affecting all of the bank's clients. It's affecting the banks themselves, the uncertainties. And what we're talking about is, regulatory structures, how regulatory structure is going to change, what are the consequences for no deal in Brexit, all of those types of things. Fascinating panel, great panel of speakers. Really looking forward to it.
Will Brexit happen? Who knows?
It's in the lap of the gods.
Yeah, indeed.
Rebecca, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Glad to have you. Well, you can catch more on geopolitics in the Big Issue debate. That's at 11 o'clock today with a session titled Impact of Nation First Politics on Global Financial Flows, Financial Organizations and Financial Regulation.
That's going to be a great session. And that brings us to the end of Good Morning Sibos for today.
We'll be back with more guests and Sibos Talk throughout the day, and also previewing all the big conference sessions we've talked about.
Up next on SibosTV, counter-terrorist financing. Are we really stopping the bad guys? And that's taking place in Conference Room 1.
We'll see you back here at 10:45 for Talking Sibos.
See you.